we've got a post here with a log we're going to look at. And the first thing I see here is that you say you're running 110 clean flight with no filters added. And I can already tell you, I understand that not everybody wants to sort of jump into the water of tuning the filters. That you may want to just stick with the defaults and even if it maybe the filters would make it fly better, which they probably will. But I have to say that even if you want to leave your gyro LPF 42 and your soft filters at 0, you should really add some D-term cut filter. Um, the P-term and the gyro are a little harder to tune, and maybe a little it's a little harder to find the sweet spot where you're sure you've made it better. But D-term needs low pass filtering so badly that everybody who's running 1.10, if you do nothing else, I mean, I haven't tested this because I have tested this a little bit. In the very beginning, I was running a custom hex from Boris that just had the D-term filter, and I immediately noticed a huge improvement in how my copter flew. And that was just with adding the D-term filter, not changing any of my PID settings. So then, once you get the D-term filter in there, you can actually raise your D gains. Like, for example, with PID 1, I wasn't able to get my D gains higher than about, say, 25 or 35 before I would start to get unwanted noise effects. The D term was amplifying the noise. But with the low pass filter, D term cut hertz, I was able to get them up into the range of 50 or 60, maybe even a little more. And that meant that the D term was more able to do the job that it was meant to be doing. It wasn't able to get to the magnitude that it needed to be to do its job because it was also having the effect of amplifying noise. But when you add the D-term cut hertz filter, the noise is filtered out and you can raise your D gains to a point where they really need to be. So if you're running CleanFlight 1.10, add some D-term cut hertz. Say a value of even 20 is a completely safe value that shouldn't negatively affect your flight and almost certainly will positively affect your flight. And maybe you could go even a little lower, maybe 17, 16, 15. I've seen people going even lower than that. But if you're not interested in doing like a ton of tuning, right, and just want to kind of play it safe, a D-term cut hertz in the range of, say, 17 to 20, I would just throw out is probably going to make almost everybody's copter fly better. Unless you're running, if you're running Harakiri PID controller 5, it has always had a low pass filter on the D term, and I'm not sure how that interacts with D term cut hertz. But I don't think a lot of people are flying Harakiri anyway, so I don't think it really matters. Anyway, so I haven't even looked at your log yet, but if you're flying Clean Flight 1.10, no matter what, I think you should be using D-term cut hertz. Even if you're not interested in tuning, I feel like really safe recommending that to just basically everybody. I think it'll make almost everybody's copter fly better than it did before. Okay, so now let's look at your log. Oh, look, right? I hate to say I told you so. Look how crazy noisy this D-term is. There is all this back and forth spiking and jumping, and that's all high frequency noise. You don't want that. And that's your roll axis. And here is your pitch axis. Same thing. Look at that. Boom. High frequency noise superimposed on a lower frequency signal. That is bad. That is getting into your motors. Look at your motors. And again, I haven't like prepped this. I just have a really strong expectation for what I'm going to see. And let's see if I'm right. I mean, I expect to be right. Yeah, see these little jiggles and wiggles in your motors? That's coming out of your, let's take the roll off of here just to give us a little more screen space. That's this noise that is making it into the PID sum, and that's making it into your motors. Now, this is probably not significantly affecting how hot your motors get or how long your flights are, right? It's affecting it a little, but it is definitely affecting how smoothly you're flying. You've constantly got this oscillation that the PID controller and the motors are having to deal with, and it's making the job a lot harder. By comparison, if you look at the log from somebody who's running soft filters, that will be much smoother. The motors will be much smoother, and the D term will be much cleaner. Okay, so definitely add that. I think you'll be happy with the results. Um, if we then go back, you see, you say you think you need to add more D to remove bounce after a roll and flip, but you're not going to be able to add more D because look at your D term. Your D term is already just going bonkers and it's making your motors noisy and it's just no good. So you say you need to add some more D. Well, what's your D at right now? Let's see. PID controller 1. That's what I fly as well. D pitch of 32. D roll of 28. Yeah, you're already at, that's not very high. That's not very high. A rule of thumb for D on PID controller 1 on clean flight 1.9 and 1.10. See, I'm very qualified answer. A rule of thumb there is about 10 times P, roughly. Now your P gains 3.9. So yes, so you in a nominal D for this setup would be around 40 and you're only at around 28. And really, I've seen it go even higher than that. Maybe you're on 4S. Yeah, you're on 4S. Okay, that's why. So you're not going to be able to raise it much because it's already making your copter fly worse because of all this noise. And if you raise it, that's only going to get worse. Again, here we go. High frequency noise superimposed on a lower frequency. Here's the lower frequency signal. Uh, what do we get when we look at your gyros? I'm curious. I'm going to look at your gyros and zoom out. Now your gyros are not super noisy, and that's because you've got gyro LPF equals 42, which is pretty filtered, right? But we do see some noisy segments here where they start to get a little messy. But overall, it's very filtered. What we get if we start using the soft filters, gyro cut hertz and p-term cut hertz, is that we start to be able to achieve more control over the degree of filtering. The way these filters work is that the lower the cutoff frequency, in other words, the more filtering you've got, the more delay there is between the signal going into the filter and the signal coming out. And delay means that the PID loop is a little bit, it's like flying with more latency, right? If I put 200 milliseconds of latency on your camera link, it's going to be harder for you to fly because your joystick is always going to be a little bit behind where the copter actually is. And when you have filtering and you have latency in the filters, the exact same thing is happening. The PID loop is always a little bit behind reality. Now that's just a fact of life. You need the filters, and the filters are going to cause some delay. The thing that the soft filters give you is they give you the ability to put just enough filtering on there to get rid of the noise and get your copter flying good while not having more filtering and delay than you really need. And it lets you strike a balance because there's a point where having less delay and more noise makes the copter fly better. And your copter may be over filtered, have too much filtering and too much delay. And so in that case, you would have a really thin, clean line, but the copter would actually fly worse. Okay, so when we look at these gyros with gyro LPF equals 42, it's quite common to see that they look really clean, and yet the copter still doesn't fly as good as it could if you were to do some tuning with p-term cut and gyro cut. Okay, so now I've said this many times before, and maybe people have missed it because not everybody reads every post I make. But people are going to ask, well, what should I use as a? And I'd say as a starting point, start with gyro cut of 100, p-term cut of 50, and d-term cut of say 17. If you're running gyro LPF equals 42 and you don't want to mess with gyro cut or p-term cut, at the very least set d-term cut to like 20, which is almost certainly higher than it needs to be. It almost certainly could be lower. But if you set d-term cut to like 20, it'll probably have some advantage, and I think it's unlikely to have any disadvantage. So then I looked a little bit at the rest of your tune, and so again see all this noise here in the P term as well. Same thing. P term needs some additional filtering, and again the soft filters will do that. But setting that aside, I looked for how your P gains were, and here's a case where you go to max throttle, or pretty close to it, and then you do a roll, I think it is. Well, maybe I backed up a little before the roll. But here you go to max throttle, and we're really not seeing any oscillation. I mean, the P term is never going to be a flat line, but we're not seeing any strong oscillations, anything that looks like you've got excess P gain. So that's good. It may have TPA that's tuning that as well. I wonder if you showed me that. TPA breakpoint, yes, 64. So you got some TPA that's probably helping there, and that's good. Um, and looking through the trace as a whole, I don't see anything sort of even close to P-term oscillation. So it makes me think that, here's again, we got max throttle and really, really nice. Nothing really to speak of here. It's very well controlled. If we look at the pitch axis, we'll probably see the same thing. If you don't see any oscillation on roll, you're probably not going to see it on pitch. Although obviously the gains are different, so anything could happen. No, I don't want yaw. Hang on. I want pitch, 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 pitch. And I'm going to get rid of your D term just because it's so noisy. It's really cluttering things up. Yeah, again, see here you're at max throttle, and really a little bit of sort of noise, but nothing that looks like a sort of a cyclic p-term oscillation. A p-term oscillation is going to be very regular in its frequency, and it's going to usually be strong and then taper off. And here we go with we got you doing a roll here, and so it's hard for me to tell because you've got TPA in the equation, but it feels to me looking at this like you might could get a little more P gain in here on both pitch and roll. Um, yeah, I don't see it. I mean, without video, again, it's a little hard to judge, but I don't see any bad tendencies that would make me think that your P gain was too high. And let's go look over here. You're doing another roll. Let's just look at what the P term does during this roll. So here we've got this roll. I'm going to zoom out just a little. Um, if we look at the P term pushes you into the roll, and then there's it pushes against the roll. So here the P term is going the same direction as the gyro. So the P term is pushing into the move. So in other words, if you're rolling to the left, the P term is pushing you to roll left faster. You now are rolling left fast enough, and the P term pushes the other way to slow the roll a little bit, and that's normal. Pushes hard in and then pushes out. And now we've got a little bit of oscillation around the center. And then as the roll begins to end, we see a push against the direction of the roll. The gyro comes up that way, and now the P term oscillates a little coming out. And again, we can see here at the gyro trace, there's a little bit of oscillation at the end of the move. In the middle of the move, though, we don't see any. We see the P term crossing the line a couple times, and that's normal. But we don't see anything that looks like hard, spiky oscillations of the P term uh, pushing way too hard and then having to back off. And so this again supports the idea that you might could use a little bit more P gain, and that'll just sharpen up your flight characteristics a little bit. It would be really hard to judge eye gain just without really looking at a video or feeling the stick, so I'm going to set that aside. Anyway, that's my advice. I cannot reiterate enough what a humongous difference in tuning and flight characteristics the low pass filter on D-term is, and what an enormous oversight it seems like that it was missing in clean flight for so long, when other PID controllers have had it, and it's clear that people out there knew that it was necessary, and for whatever reason, and this is not a criticism of anybody, I mean everybody has different knowledge bases and focuses. For whatever reason, it wasn't in clean flight until, except for Harakiri, which had it, but wasn't universal in clean flight until Boris added it. And it makes such a big difference that everyone should fly with it, in my opinion. If you do nothing else, you should fly with it. And if you really want to experience something, start playing with gyro cut and P-term cut. And again, start with gyro cut of 100, P-term cut of 50, D-term cut of 17, and gyro LPF 188. That's my suggested starting values. If your copter's flying very noisy with a lot of vibration, you may need to lower gyro cut maybe as low as 60 or even 50, and P term cut as low as maybe 50 or even 40, and D term maybe as low as 12 or 10. But D term usually flies a little better when it's a little higher. Anyway, that's my advice. Thanks for submitting, and happy flying.